are the best decks in Master Duel, as well as information on the leaks that just came out. Everybody, I am Master Duel Cali, and today we're going to be going over these particular strategies. Of course, if you have a strategy that you think that I missed, let me know down below in the comment section. And today I will be letting you know everything that you need to know about how successful can these strategies be in Master Duel. Let's go ahead and start off with Adamantipator. And of course, we're going to be let's go ahead and start off with the new strategies that we are getting. So according to the leaks that we've seen, Ninjas, Kashtira, the Chaos cards are all going to be on their way. Let's go ahead and talk about them right now. Oh, as well as the Amazement cards. Let's go ahead and talk about them right now, and I think their implication. The Amazement cards, the new support is new support for the Amazement strategy. And ironically, you haven't seen Amazement most of the time in any of the top ladders like Masters, Diamonds, or even Platinum, because the deck is not good. Now, it's a fun engine to maybe incorporate inside of like a Labyrinth or an Altergeist deck, but unfortunately, it's just not good at all. And even when in the TCG, the support came out, it was very, very lackluster. The Chaos support. Now, Chaos Angel is a god Yu-Gi-Oh card. Itself is amazing. But to be honest with you guys, the support overall is another element of where I would say at best would be experimental. I think that Chaos Angel does changes a lot of aspects for the game and does make Yu-Gi-Oh really interesting, but the Chaos in totality, not necessarily great cards. Now, Kashtira. A lot of players have been really worried about Kashtira taking over Master Duel. Relax, guys. Kashtira or Riceheart and the other cards that made this deck ridiculously busted don't seem to be confirmed yet. And if this is any indication of what happened in the TCG, Kashtira is at best experimental. Now, to be fair, Tier Limit was completely dominant by the time Kashtira did come out. There were so many other cards that were available to us that weren't available to you guys, like all of the Tier Limit cards were completely unlimited, that forced people to play Tier Limit or bust. But even outside of that, Kashtira was a very fair Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that needed other supplementary cards just to be able to make rank 7s that aren't necessarily ridiculously good. I think that Kashtira is in an experimental spot. It'll 100% be way better in Master Duel than it was in its TCG counterpart at around the time, but not something I think is to fear. Kashtira Finra is cards that you're going to need for your deck for most decks though. Lastly is Ninja. I would go ahead and say that Ninja are also experimental, and the main reason is because Ninja's playability is so aligned to Kashtira. Cards like Book of Moon and Book of Eclipse play huge parts to Ninja's strategy, and if it can just be as equally as good against some of the top decks in the game, then that's where Ninjas can thrive. For right now, I don't think that it's necessarily bad, but it's not necessarily the top of the top. But I will say one more thing. I will be playing Ninjas in Diamond and Masters when I get the cards. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Guaranteed we're playing it. Adamantipator, I would say, takes a good pilot. I think I had it rated as really good the last time I done this tier list. The reason why I dropped it down a rung is because as soon as your opponent realizes they can stop Block Dragon, the deck does struggle a lot, and that would be the real big reason. But overall, a good pilot can be able to overcome those situations and still make some satisfying boards. Branded, I would say, is really good as a deck by itself, but probably is better as a Tier Limit variant. And that's because of the hits to Aluber, Branded Opening, and Branded Fusion. Those hits finally started to catch up to the strategy, and now it's not as powerful, but still really, really solid. Blue Eyes and Dark Magician. I don't want to tell you guys to not waste your gems playing this deck, but if you guys are trying to climb the ladder, then these decks make it ridiculously hard. Keep in mind, I'm not saying that your deck is bad. This is on the ease of being able to climb the ladder and get yourself to Masters with these particular strategies, and you're definitely on hard mode when you're playing with these. Build them, sure, but only use them maybe for casual play. Dark World. So there's a couple of problems with Dark World. First of all, you need to fight against the time, and secondly, you need to not brick. And those are things that happen in Dark World. The good thing is that the Bestial monsters are limited, and Droll and Lockbird is not being played. Droll and Lockbird may never be played in Master Duel. It might be weird because it's not best of 3, and there are too many other decks that just don't need it. Though I do think that Droll is a good Yu-Gi-Oh card. Dark World definitely will take a great pilot because you have to manage not only your opponent's resources, you also have to manage the time clock, and you can't just turn your brain off and hand loop your opponent. Dinos, I would say, is experimental. Jimmy from MDC, Master Duel Central, would definitely disagree. He thinks that this is a top Yu-Gi-Oh strategy and nothing beats it. I'm more practical. This deck bricks. It's not necessarily the best, opportunity for your Dino decks, especially, or for your deck, especially since it's so costly. So I wouldn't invest into it. Dogmatica definitely takes a really good pilot. Shout out to my man Paul from Team APS from getting the Masters with this deck and letting me know the insights. Grinding with this deck is ridiculously hard when you get the diamond and above, and it's mainly because it's a genuine struggle when players actually start to connect their brain tissue together and understand that, hey, losing your extra deck isn't the end of the world. It may actually help you in too many situations. Dragon is still one of the best decks in the game, hands down. Like, there's no competition and no debate. This deck is so powerful because it incorporates the Bystials, one of the best out of any strategy available, but also is really resilient at being able to bounce back against some of the opponent's most powerful cards. Evil Eye is way too fair. I would almost say that Evil Eye is almost Xbox cross playoff. This deck instant loses to super polymerization. It instant loses to your opponent just having back row removal, which is pretty prevalent. It can lose to evenly match. It's not a great deck, but it's really, really fun to play, and we did play it. Exo Sister takes a good pilot, but I would really say takes a good hand. Because if you draw Shifter every game, you're going to win a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh matches, right? It's just how Exo Sister rolls. This deck can be a little bit gimmicky, and I think that isn't a good investment if you're looking for a deck for the future, because when Kashtira comes out, the graveyard almost stops to exist when it comes out full power. Floowandereeze, ironically, is still really good. I don't know how it works, but it's still really good. Floowandereeze just keeps getting hit and still winds up being a powerful deck, kind of like how Despia was. A bold take, if you will. I think that Runic for Hire is one of the strongest Runic variants, is because it actually has outs to the opponent's back row decks like Labyrinth, while also being able to draw all of the resources that you need. Generator's biggest problem is that it's inconsistent as all hell, so I would say takes a good pilot, but also keep in mind when this deck does pop off, it does pop off. Maxi is a card that you have to respect. Goaty, yeah, Goaty's experimental. That's at best. Let's just be real. I'm not even gonna lie. I wouldn't even put Goaty that high. Goaty's not a great deck. I am genuinely sorry for all the people I told. I thought that there was gonna be a way better deck than what it is, and unfortunately, it isn't. Same thing with B Trooper. It says a lot when B Trooper's best card in the entire game, Maxi. They can search it, and this deck is not consistently a good deck, which is really, really weird. It just goes to show how powerful or not powerful this deck is. Labyrinth is one of the top decks in the entire game. It dictates how we play Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot of players are playing evenly matched Lightning Storm, Dusters, and stuff specifically for this deck. And a lot of decks like Dragons or Runic can take full advantage of it because they don't lose to those particular strategies when you play in Built-In right. I would say Madolche is experimental. It's maybe it takes a good pilot, maybe experimental. I think it's a tweener between those two because Madolche doesn't do necessarily anything right, but it doesn't do anything wrong. And it still does take a great player to be able to use. Magic Key, just turn that Xbox off, my man. Just don't do that. Like, Magic Key's bad. Don't even attempt to build that deck. You're gonna save yourself a lot of time. Marine Test, ironically, is a lot better than what people think. Hand traps are still really important. My biggest problem with Marine Test is playing into Maxi and also going second boards, but it's still really powerful. Heroes takes a really good pilot, though I do have a asterisk next to it. I would not build this deck if you want something cheap and good, because for its price, this deck is terrible. But if you're a really big hero fanatic, if you're an anime fanatic, probably the best anime deck. Well, I guess Marine Test is an anime too, so never mind. Math Mech, experimental. The deck hard loses to Bystials, and I wouldn't want you guys to just lose to a card that everybody's playing to counter decks like Tyranny. Melfi Sprite. I think Melfi Sprite is still one of the top available variants. It's extremely good and has a really good Labyrinth matchup. Now, this is another bold take. I think that this is one of the best decks in the game. It has no bad matchups. Naturia has no bad matchups, and it has great matchups against decks like Labyrinth. It has great matchups against decks like Runic because of Naturia Beast and Naturia Barkion. And it just summons really huge monsters, but when it all fails, synchro summon into Shinging and activate Runic cards to get rid of your opponent's important cards. Plunder Patrol Experimental, the deck's way too fair. That's pretty much the summation of Plunder Patrol. Punk. So Punk and Punk variants, I still think that they're pretty good. I think that they're solid Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that can create boards. Maybe even closer to takes a really good pilot. Maybe that, because they do have their fair share of weaknesses and they don't interact with the game as you would want to. I would say that Rika is really good. This deck is just secretly good and people don't play it enough because I genuinely don't know. I thought that people would catch on in the TCG because this deck just keeps winning events after events. You would think that that would be an indicator that, hey, this deck might be good at Master Duel. Granted, there is stuff like Maxi, but still being able to break your opponent's board by tributing their monsters for cost is ridiculous. Scareclaw, I would never tell you at any point to build this deck anymore. It's just not worth it. Their best monster is just not great. It would be better off to just play the Link monster and not play the Scareclaw monsters. And there are decks that will do that, which is crazy. Every other variant of Sprite is really good. It's just a solid overall deck. Swordsoul gets power crept from time to time, but it's still a deck that if you know what you're doing, you can win games. Tier Limit is the best deck still one of the best decks in the entire game. That does change when we get more Kashtira cards. And keep in mind, Kashtira Finra can be splashed in a lot of these decks so long as it isn't limited in the selection pack that's coming up. You can splash multiple copies of Kashtira Finra in every single deck and have a way to be able to help break your opponent's board or force them to use Interruption on it. Therion's pure, don't do it. Trap Tricks is actually amazingly good. And I would say that Tri-Brigade, it's not that good. It's a little bit power crept. And that's all what I have for the Master Duel tier list. This is pretty solid if you're trying to get into the rank ladder and trying to climb in it. A lot of these decks that in Master Duel, these top rows, it's literally like easy wins all the way up until mid to high diamond. And then you gotta prove yourself. The second row is still easy wins all the way until diamond, but when diamond and you start to see a little bit of funkiness, and then every deck below it, it's not necessarily hard to win in diamond, but it does become harder than the other decks. I really hope you guys enjoy it. And if you guys have any other questions, any other problems, maybe a beef with the tier list that I did, let me know down below. I'll catch you on the next one.